The page we were looking at before. We're going to go back and finish up the sociological method. But what I want to do, go back to the chart on page 19 though, because we're going to back up what we were saying about the theoretical perspectives. And just as importantly, what we're going to do, I'm going to show you why these things are important. I think sometimes as sociologists we skip over what we assume that you know and understand why these things are important, and I think it's instructive here to explain what the again. Each one of these perspectives was built on a different school of thought. They came about in different historical periods. Functionalists came along first. Conflict theorists come along second. Symbolic Interactionists came in third to fill in sort of the hole that they saw of these macro theories that weren't focusing on smaller groups, individuals, how individuals are being impacted by social forces, culture, and things like that. And then even postmodernism, which is not well accepted, by most sociologists, is still an important perspective in the sense that it says things about sociology or about society that all these other theoretical perspectives do not. And remember, before we went to this chart, one of the things we were looking at was the scientific method. And we had gotten to the point of formulating a hypothesis, and then we talked about choosing a research method. So one of the things that theoretical perspective, you may want to write, here's one of the ways you want to take notes while I'm doing the slideshow, okay? You may want to write either, slideshow 1 or, functionalist slideshow, and then put notes or the examples that I gave. That chair should be, if you want to move that around there. You can probably move it over there if you want.
That's cool.
Okay, that's fine. Anyway, my last class didn't have enough desks. Anyway, so one of the things that the theoretical perspectives deal with are what kind of methodology do you use to study certain perspectives. So if you were looking at something like functionalism that was interested in the behavior of large bureaucratic institutions, let's say they wanted to study the U.S. military. Remember some of the methodologies we looked at. There was, I think it might be instructional rates right here. So, one of them was surveys. Another one was observation, both participant and non-participant. Remember we talked about that there's good and bad things to that. If you remember, if you guys read this example, let me give you an example of what issues can be brought up with participant observation when you're not honest. Listen to this. Laud Humphreys, a classmate of mine at Washington University in St. Louis, was an Episcopal priest who had decided to become a sociologist. For his PhD, Humphreys studied social interaction in tea rooms, public restrooms, this is on page 30, where some men go for quick anonymous oral sex with other men. Humphreys found that this is actually where the former governor of New Jersey was doing this. Remember Governor McGreevey? Anybody from New Jersey? If you're from Manhattan, you're close enough to who heard of this? Remember the Governor McGreevey case? He was a married man and was the governor at the time and was going to restrooms and having sex with homosexual men, and he got found out. So anyway, so this still occurs even though this is the 1970s. Humphreys found that some restrooms in Forest Park just across from our campus were tea rooms. He began a participant observation study by hanging around these restrooms. He found that in addition to two men having sex, a third man called a watch queen served as a lookout for police and other unwelcome strangers. Back in the 70s, it was, first of all, it's illegal to commit sex acts out in public, but in the 70s, in many states, I don't know about Missouri, it probably was, it was actually illegal to commit acts of homosexual sex. And there are still states to this day where oral sex is outlawed. I'm not kidding. Okay? The attempt there, though, is to make homosexuals criminals by making that law, but also to prevent public sex from going on, like the Hugh Grant thing. Remember when he got caught with the hooker in the back of a rental car parked on the street? And Elizabeth Hurley still stayed with him. Anyway, Humphreys took on the role of watch queen, not only watching for strangers, but also observing what the men did. He wrote field notes after the encounters. You have to imagine, this is a former Episcopal priest hanging around in a public restroom while two men are engaged in a public sex act. and he's watching this as his PhD dissertation. One question that comes up from an ethical standpoint is that, are you sure you're being a sociologist, or are you doing this for your own fulfillment or some kind of weird pleasure that you're getting out of this, witnessing other? Let's put it here for me. Thank you. Now, again, I don't think that's what he was doing, but what do you guys think? Do you think he was just fulfilling his own sick perversions, or was he actually engaged in sociological research? And would there have been a better way to do it? Would there have been a better way to do this?
Wait, I have a question. Was he the watch queen?
Yeah, he was watching for the cops. So he was actually trying. He was actually.
This is so sick.
First of all, he was lying to them and saying he was gay. Clearly, right?
Yeah, in the bathroom. And
yes. And not only was he watching out for police, he was kind of peering over the stall.
See what they were doing.
Yeah, what? Like, dude, trust them. That's what they're doing. Okay.
Jesus Christ.
Again, it's almost like if this guy had a camcorder, he probably would have recorded it. So you got to ask yourself: was he really sociologically interested, or was he sexually, personally interested?
Did he get like any results that like?
Well, we'll see. So keep that in mind as we go along.
That's weird.
But he wrote field notes of this, which is almost could be considered to be pornography. It's like worse than the impeachment hearing of Bill Clinton, right? With cigars and thongs and all kinds of stuff like that. Oral sex in the hallway and blue dresses. Anyway, Humphreys decided that he wanted to learn about the regular lives of these men. For example, what was the significance of the wedding rings that many of them wore? He came up with an ingenious technique. Many of the men parked their cars near the tea rooms, and Humphreys recorded their license plate numbers.
This guy's like a sicko.
That's what I'm trying to get at. I mean, what's really behind this? You know, I mean, what somebody could accuse him of is that you are just thinly veiling your perversion as sociology and curiosity, when in reality, you just want to, at the very minimum, exploit these people to get a good publication, right? Because it's sensational. Men having oral sex in public restrooms while other people are watching, or you are like Pee Wee Herman, and you're some kind of a pervert, and this is how you get your kicks, is writing. Because look, if you don't like sex, you would not want to do a project like this, would you? If you're disgusted by the behavior of heterosexual or homosexual people, that you think that pornography is wrong, are you going to go after a study like this? Are you going to do a study like this? There's other things you can study. You can study union organizing at Walmart. Okay? You know? You can study poverty in the inner city or something, or failing schools. Sociology, the beautiful thing about sociology, it is a very broad thing. You can look at culture, you can look at institutions, you can look at global sociology. Nobody said to this guy, hey dude, this is the only thing left to research. Right? He chose this. It wasn't out of a hat. They're like, oh yeah, okay everybody. Alright, take a slip out of the hat, and that determines what PhD subject. PhD subjects usually are something. A lot of people are critical of this. They call it me-search. A lot of PhD research is something that's personally important to you. I have a colleague, or had a colleague, she now teaches at another place. She adopted a Chinese child, and so she wrote her dissertation about the adjustments of adopting. She wasn't Chinese. And I have another friend who had medical issues, and so he wrote his dissertation about medical issues. And part of the issue with what is the problem about researching something you're close to? Yeah, like, you know, if you're the victim of racism and you do a paper on racism, might your study be tainted by your emotionality on the issue, potentially? Could be, it might not be. Maybe, the other argument is, can somebody make an argument that you want somebody with personal experience of like kidney disease or Chinese adoption or racism or gender discrimination? Why would that might be a positive thing for your research? Yes? And plus, if you're the victim of racism, you know what questions to ask somebody who's been the victim of racism. And for example, if you're from the Latino community and you're studying, you guys remember this case in Patchogue where the Central American guy, the immigrant from Central America, was stabbed and they chased him down the street. You guys didn't hear about this?
I heard about
the Lucero case, right? That if a white person studies that, it's especially upper middle class white person who's never faced any kind of real racism in their life, they study that. They may not, the people who they're interviewing may not want to talk to them. They may not know exactly how it feels, so they don't know what questions to ask, right? It may not be the case. You may also, again, you may want two researchers, right? Someone who has personal experience and someone who doesn't. sort of like good cop, bad cop, where they can sort of play off. One can talk about the personal emotional elements and how that drives into the research. The other one can kind of rein the person in and say, oh, I think you're going a little too far with this. Are you sure that you have evidence and that kind of stuff? So, but let me finish this and we'll talk about some of the ethical issues here. So I think one of the ethical issues is that he used his contacts in the police department to look up people's license plate numbers. You're not allowed to do that kind of stuff. And the police department guy violated police rules. You cannot let civilians get a hold of police records. Ask any cop. Anybody know any police? You can't do this kind of stuff. I'm telling you right now. Right? This is akin to leaking defense information. You know? It's like if somebody was arrested at 16 for a crime and the record's sealed and you go in and dig around in the police department or break in their computer and reveal that, you're in trouble. The other person's not in trouble. You are in trouble. Okay? Many of them, a friend in the St. Louis Police Department gave Humphreys each man's address. About a year later, Humphreys arranged for these men to be included in a medical survey conducted by some of the sociologists on our faculty. So he's lying right there. So he's pretending that they're putting these people in the study because he caught them in the bathroom, not because they're actually one to be in the study. But going on, listen to this. Disguising himself with a different hairstyle and clothing, Humphreys visited the men's home. Now, remember, this is a former priest from the Episcopal Church here. Not the Catholic Church, the Episcopal Church, which is a little bit different. If you've ever, Episcopalians, I believe, they ordain homosexual people. One of the churches, I'll look that up, it may not be the Episcopal. There is a church that ordains not only women, but homosexual. I'm not kidding. And you talk about the Catholics and Protestants being up in arms. My gosh. Right? You imagine a Baptist minister that was gay? There probably are out there, but is that accepted? And with the Catholic Church, are you allowed to be anything, heterosexual or gay? Right? You assume the Pope is heterosexual, right? But we don't know, because he's supposedly not sexually active. He interviewed the men supposedly for the medical study. He found that they led conventional lives, trying to hide it, sort of in the closet. They voted. I'm not sure what that has to do with oral sex in the bathroom. Mowed their lawn. I'm not sure what mowing their lawns. Again, a lot of people mow their lawns. Hey, one of the things that comes across in their description of this is, what's the impression that people had about gay men, according to Humphreys' study, before he finally revealed the fact that these people were quite similar to people? What impression did people have about gay men in particular that comes across by his surprise at what he found? So he found they were normal. What was the assumption beforehand? The gay men were what? You can say it, the camera won't. The gay men were what in the 1970s, or early or late 60s? What? They were normal? No, that they were weirdos, and they didn't vote, and they kept a bad house, and didn't mow their lawns, and were complete slobs, and were deviants on every level, not just on... Did you see the absurdity? And this is one of the beauties of even unethical, potentially unethical sociological research, is that he busted up a lot of stereotypes, right? That all gay men are flaming and, oh my God, and I'm going to wear a pink dress to the prom. That kind of, and, oh, we need to do some interior decorating here. Look at these walls. This is terrible in here. The gay men are not like that. There's plenty of them who are big, tough guys. They'll kick the hell out of you. Okay, I'm telling you. Just like all lesbians are not like these, have their heads shaved and with tattoos on their arms, wearing plaid shirts. Look at Portia de Rossi. She's gay. She looks like some brute axe-wielding lumberjack. No. So one good thing about some of this research is that would blow away some of these ignorant stereotypes that people had about gay people. And I'm telling you right now, before people were more comfortable with coming out of the closet, I assure you that your parents, because they're from an earlier generation, they knew gay people and they didn't even know they were gay because they acted completely normal, right? I've had friends where I was like, they sort of were not in the closet, but they never volunteered the information, and one day we're just like, oh, I date men. And it's like, in the 1960s or 50s especially, that would really be a serious, like, whoa. Right? But nowadays, most people, how many people here would be really upset if somebody you found out, we were friends with before, and you found out they were gay and they didn't tell you? Why?
Because then it's just like weird, I guess. But
well, do you think that they were trying to hit on you?
You never know.
Why would that bother you if you're not gay?
Because then I'll be thinking about it all the time and be like, he gay? Like, what did he say to me? Like, is that...
So maybe you would question: is this guy being nice to me because he's my friend, or because he wants to, like,
exactly.
you know, try and you know, make a move?
I've seen crazy stuff happen.
Yeah. Believe it or not, for some reason, people assume I am gay, which doesn't bother me for the most part, unless it happens in front of a bunch of heterosexual women. I remember, I'll tell you right now, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's I had a gay person tell me it's the way I talk, or something like that. I remember sitting on a bench in Virginia Beach. I was just sitting there, minding my own business. Some guy sits down, and he starts sighing, like he wants to get my attention, like that. And I knew immediately what the hell was going to happen next. I was like, oh no, here it comes. And he turns around and he goes, excuse me, do you know where any gay bars are? And he knew where the gay bars were. He wanted to know if I wanted to go with him. Because the next question, if I would have said yes, was, oh, will you show me? You know, and he wasn't being obnoxious, and when I told him that I didn't know, I think he got the message and he laid off. So what it also speaks to his study is that social change. That even some people might feel somewhat comfortable if one of their friends was hitting on them. For the most part, it wouldn't bother you if your friend was merely gay, right?
I guess not. I have a gay friend, but like, it's always like this.
As long as they're not hitting on you, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's it.
But as long as they're know the boundaries that you are heterosexual and that it's not going to... This is what I love. Just like some heterosexuals think that you can change homosexuals back, there's a certain percentage of gay men, particularly gay women too, who think that they can turn people, heterosexual men, over because they read a lot of these books about sexual thought, and most heterosexual people have homosexual thoughts at some point, even if they're just flashing ideas like someone, oh, Brad Pitt looks good today, that kind of stuff. And that homosexual men know this, so potentially some of them, a very small percentage. I've actually had lots of gay people as friends, and I actually had one guy, I worked at a pizza place in Virginia Beach again. I'm not sure what it's up in Virginia Beach. And this guy offered me $100 to go home with him. I'm not kidding. Every day he would say something about, and he was bisexual, every day he'd say something about how he wanted to kiss me and all kinds of stuff, and he was my boss. It was awesome. He wasn't my boss. He was like the store manager, shift manager. It was odd. No. The problem was he was such a nice guy that it was hard to, and it was hard to tell whether he was joking or not. But again, I think what's interesting comes out here is how the differing views of homosexuality over time. So, anyway, all right, so let's move on with the rest of the study. And they took their kids to Little League games, they had kids, they were married. Many reported that their wives were not aroused sexually or were afraid of getting pregnant because their religion did not allow them to use birth control. Humphreys concluded that heterosexual men were also using the tea rooms for a form of quick sex. So he's saying that it wasn't just homosexual men who were in there. It was heterosexual men who had these fantasies. But I would say if you are not just only thinking about homosexual sex but engaging in it, then most people would classify you as what? Bisexual, like Elton John, right? Is Lady Gaga bisexual? That's what I've heard.
I think she said that.
I heard her say something like, when I make love, I don't really care what gender they are, or something. I swear she said something like that.
There's actually a thing in Newsday that said how she had a threesome and stuff.
Yeah, that might just be, again, yeah, I mean, a threesome's not necessarily bisexuality.
Yeah.
Right?
I think she said that she was, though.
Right. But again, the press picks that up because they like sensational stuff. And this is what they assume about celebrities, that they're all perverts or weirdos or goofballs or Charlie Sheens. Anyway, this study stirred controversy among sociologists and non-sociologists alike. Many sociologists criticized Humphreys, and a national columnist even wrote a scathing denunciation of sociological snoopers. One of our professors even tried to get Humphreys' PhD revoked. As the controversy heated up and a court case loomed, Humphreys feared that his list of respondents might be subpoenaed. He gave me the list to take from Missouri to Illinois, where I began teaching. When he called and asked me to destroy it, I burned the list in my backyard. Hey, Giddens, I think that's, or is this Henslin? This is James Henslin. You're under arrest for destroying evidence. That's like the Nixon case or something. They could at least have charged him with destroying evidence, obstruction of justice, if there was a crime committed.
Wait, who did that?
the guy who wrote the book. He burned the notes.
Really?
He was a colleague of this guy.
Oh, so that's why he...
Right, they knew each other. That's why he knew the story so well.
Oh, that's weird.
And the Humphreys guy gave Hensland the notes with the names of the people on it and what they had done in the bathroom. Because, again, because at the time, homosexual acts were against the law. So these people could have went to jail if he would have had to give the... And the police could subpoena the list. Right? I mean, it's not like... When you're a sociologist, you're not a journalist. And I don't think he got IRB approval. You have to get Institutional Review Board approval to conduct it. Like, if I wanted to ask kids about... If I wanted to ask kids what they had seen on TV regarding sex, first of all, I'd have to get permission of the parents. And then I'd have to be cleared from the university to ask kids those types of questions. And three, I'd have to absolutely guarantee that the information would be not coded based on name and would be unable to be traced back to the original respondents in case something came out. Particularly if you're asking things about, like, if you have a survey and you're asking anonymous respondents about child abuse, whether or not they committed it, that's an admission of a crime. So sociologists always have to be careful about keeping things confidential, anonymous, not asking unethical questions, not putting people in a position where they have to reveal things that might potentially put them in any kind of jeopardy, either by people in their family or, more importantly, the law. You know, one of the things, like, and this is a problem, because how in the hell are you going to interview drug dealers? And ask them questions. Hey, how many people show up at your house? What do you charge for drugs? Do you get people in the middle of the night coming in here who don't have money? What do you do when they keep coming back? Do the police knock on your door? Do they follow you? Think you're being followed? Do you ever had a run-in with another gang member or something? You know? Those are questions that aren't those questions you want to know? And instead, we have to leave it up to the History Channel's program on Gangland. Because they can ask questions. History Channel can ask questions and have people admit crimes on TV without asking anybody's permission except for their producer's permission. And you know how television works. The more ridiculous, the more sensational. People love that show. Right? You seen the show?
Yeah, I like Gangland.
Because it's interesting. It's both factual and it's dramatic and it's wild. You know, you hear the interviews straight from the mouths of these people who have done these things.
When you think about it, it's like someone who isn't in jail who knows that is probably watching it and is like, I know.
There's another thing.
I know the shape of your head.
Yeah, like even if you black out someone's voice or their face, you know. And there's the other issue. It ain't just the police with gangs and drug dealers. It's the other gang members. And I saw you on that show on National Geographic Channel, and I'm going to kill you because you told everybody what we're doing. I'm shocked. There's actually a series of shows that were called Drugs Incorporated, and they did cocaine. And they had drug dealers to straight face, right to camera going, yeah, I'm dealing drugs. Almost like, here's my address, come and get me. Like intervention. Here's the other thing about intervention that's somewhat unethical that's related to this. They tell those people, remember, one of the issues was this, was what did he lie about?
Like his identity?
Right, he didn't tell him that he was a researcher, right? And intervention tells the people, we're going to do a documentary on addiction. They don't tell them we're going to intervene on you and you know, confront you with your family and friends. And interventions many times get confrontational. One of them with an alcoholic named Brett. He just left the room and ran down the street. He just had it with these people. But here's the problem. If you tell people you're going to do a documentary on addiction or alcohol use, and aren't you encouraging that addict to use more drugs during the period of time you have the camera in their face? Do you think that the individual, the addict, thinks that the camera crew wants to show up and then say, you know what, I just got clean. Sorry, I'm going to cut down this week. I don't have any money. I almost think they give them money to buy drugs or something. Or pay them for their time. Maybe they don't go, here, go buy heroin, but here's $1,000 for your time. Which is sort of like, wink, wink, go buy some crack and smoke it in front of the camera. And more importantly, they are filming crimes being committed, both purchasing drugs and consuming drugs. One of the women who was an alcoholic, her name was Sylvia, she almost got, did you see this one?
No.
She was a vodka, she had this little bottles of vodka, she'd drink at work too. She lost several jobs, her kids got taken away from her. But they were filming her out of her bar getting drunk, and she was ripped. And then she went out to get in the car, and they had to stop her. Which normally, documentary film crews and journalists do not get involved in their subjects. Right? You're not supposed to do that kind of stuff. So. Anyway. Alright. But one of the big points, was the research ethical? Was this research ethical? Should this be done this way, or what should he have done differently that would have made it more ethical?
Like stood outside the door, maybe. Then
Or how about the study with a sociologist? Why couldn't he just said, "Hey, I'm interested in what you're doing"? What's the problem with going, "Hey, I'm a sociologist. Here's my phone number. Give me a call. I want to talk to you about your illegal behavior inside the bathroom." What's the problem with that? Is anybody going to talk to him? So he's a bit of a dilemma here. He wants the information, but you can't get it unless... So there's part of the problem with observation. Okay? You can also do things like interviews. Also, you can do secondary analysis, which is information, data that has already been collected by other people. That's what I'm doing. I'm looking at research on data that has been collected on youth smoking, and nobody's done the analysis on it, so I'm using that along with another database. And this can be things like case studies, other surveys that other people have done, census data. There's also experiments. I think your book was one more, but this is good enough. But here's the issue with the theoretical perspectives. So functionalism is a macro approach, which means it takes a large-scale view of social forces. That culture, ideology, institutions, these things shape our life and our behavior. Conflict theory is also a macro approach, where you're looking at large bodies, large groups of people. We'll come back to each one of these. This is a micro approach. This focuses on small groups and individuals. Now, let's go back to functionalism. Now, one of the things that theoretical perspectives determines is what focus you have of the research. So if you're a symbolic interactionist and you want to look at corporate behavior, what would you look at? If you want to look at corporate culture, what would you look at? Remember, symbolic interactionism is a micro approach. It's interested in small groups and individuals and how they behave. What would you look at? One of the things, and it's okay that nobody knows, that's why we're in here. One of the things you'd want to look at is how individuals were getting along. Maybe you go to the break room, see how people are talking. Are people friends outside of work? What kind of personalities impact the organizational structure? How do people break rules, and what happens when they do it? Those types of things. And here's the issue as well. Not only does it determine your focus, as you can see here, on page 19, on that chart. Okay? But it also usually determines what type of methodologies you can use. If you wanted to survey the U.S. Army, if you wanted to collect information on the U.S. Army, which one would be the most efficient and potentially most effective way to research a large organization that has about 2 million members in it? Would you want to do face-to-face interviews? Would you want to do participant observation? Maybe, but what's the problem with participant observation in the Army? Yeah. you gotta hook up with the Army and they drag you off. It's better just to pretend you're a journalist or something like that. That might be worth it. So, but again, maybe non-participant observation. How about surveys? That would probably be the preferred way to do it, right? Why would it be better to use a survey if you're trying to collect information on 2 million people? Yes?
well, when if you did face to face, everyone wouldn't you only have to have one person answering all questions? It's
well, surveys can actually. It's even easier than that.
I know. I'm just saying that's why you do a survey, because it's everyone's getting the same.
Oh, right. I can't remember what they call this. It's sort of generalizability, comparability, standardization. That's what it's called. That all the answers. That if I'm doing interviews, maybe I change the questions up. Whereas if I do a survey, everybody's answering the same questions in the same order. So that's part of it. Yes.
It's faster.
Right. For the most part, if you tried to do face-to-face interviews, it would take forever. Right. And with surveys, there's this thing called SurveyMonkey. Have you ever seen this thing? I'm sure maybe some of your professors or somebody's done. You can put a survey up online. Not only does it collect the information for you, and you can just send people to the website, and you don't need any paper, you don't need to print things out. It puts the information into a data sheet for you, so you can upload it into SPSS, which is a software program, and you can analyze it instantly. It's beautiful. Okay, so that's one easy way to do it. Plus, with large numbers, you want to be able to do these types of statistical analysis, and it's hard to do when you're doing interviews because, again, one of the points you made, not everybody's going to get the same questions. Here's the other problem. On surveys, there are multiple choice answers, right? So there's only 4 or 5 possible answers. On open questions, which can be inside surveys, you can ask a question like, explain to me why you joined the Army, which is different than, choose which one of the following reasons best fits why you joined the Army. See the difference? Right? So that's a big difference. As far as so in conflict theorists would mostly use surveys and things in secondary analysis. Micro perspectives is usually these 2 things. You want to look at like one particular division at IBM and how they behave. You go in, maybe you observe or whatever. One of the beautiful things about observation is non-participant observation. If I wanted to look at, if I wanted to determine people's like spatial intelligence or in large crowds, I could just go to Grand Central Station, couldn't I? And just set up a camera and just watch how people navigate through the area, right, and through the space. Okay. You could also do things like if you wanted to study, and you wouldn't even need an institutional review board. If you wanted to determine what's the gender makeup, or what's the age, or what's the behavior, or just something simple like, what do people talk about at bars on Friday night? And does it change based on age or gender? I could just go into, there's a little bar in Port Jefferson called Billy's. I could just go in there. Anybody ever been to the Terra Inn? You gotta bring hamburgers. Anyway. But I can just go in there and sit there and either audio tape it or just observe it and write down. And there's nothing unethical, in my opinion, although some people might argue with this, there's nothing unethical about that. You're out in public. Look, if I want to see how parents and children interact at Walmart, do you think I really need to go up and get the approval of these people? It's better that I don't. Because what if I go up to them and say, you know what, I'm trying to look at the obedience and disobedience in public places based on parental styles. Don't you think that once, and we talked about this last time, don't you think once I tell them what I'm looking at, that they're going to alter their view? One of the things, if you're studying something like deviance, like conflict between parents and children, when you tell people that that's what you're studying, all of a sudden the conflict goes away. They go, oh, I love this kid. I'd never yell at him at the store, and he'd never yell back at me. All of a sudden their behavior changes. The way it changes when, like, you ever been in a dressing room? You know somebody's behind that glass, I hope you know. There's cameras behind that glass. That's two-way glass. Some of you are like, oh, really? You didn't know that? They're watching you. So it sometimes alters people's behavior. And if you look at psychological experiments, they do that. They sit behind a window or a mirror. Like, I don't know you're behind a mirror. You know how you can test a two-way mirror? Put a lighter up to it. I'm telling you, you'll see the spot. Because it's really a window with like the mirror sheen on it. So I'm telling you, people. Now the next time you go to a dressing room, you're going to think twice. And people act goofy in dressing rooms too when they don't realize that somebody's watching them, right? That's why. But why do they do that? Besides being perverts. Yeah, they're looking for shoplifters. I really don't. I almost think that they're. Again, I think they're making like porn tapes or something. Right? I'm telling you right now, I would be shocked if these tapes didn't make it out. I bet they're on the internet. Don't you think? You know? I swear I remember saw a news thing where they've got stuff online like up a skirt camera and in the shower camera and stuff like that. I'm not kidding you. Yeah. The next time you're in a dressing room, think twice about taking all your clothes off or doing something goofy. Anyway, so again, theoretical perspectives determine what types of methodology you're going to use and also what focus you have. Now, after you choose the research method, the next step is collecting the data. Okay, that's on page 21. And then, after you collect the data, you usually have to use either some statistical program or some kind of analysis. Even if you're asking open-ended questions, you have to find some way to code that. Many times you can just use descriptive analysis of qualitative data, which is like interviews and things, and say, well, you know, if you interviewed 30 people and 20 of them said a similar thing, you can use that as an example of potential proof of some theory or hypothesis that you have. And then number 8, which is the one that most sociologists drives them crazy, is sharing your results, which means publishing your results in a journal or at a conference or in a book. This is the key to getting tenure at probably most disciplines. The more research you publish, the better your chances you have. And then after that, your research is open for criticism and revision and updating. You know, most sociologists will do surveys over and over again, and many times you want to do things over time. There was this guy in England who did, I think he was an anthropologist, but he did something similar to what a sociologist would do. He was interested in the life course and how people grow up, so and how their goals change over time and how their attitude and personality change over time. So he took a group of school kids that were 7 years old. He called it 7 Up. Believe it or not, I'm not sure why he didn't get sued for, or Up 7, something like that. I'm not sure why he didn't get sued by the soda, but I don't think it's around. 7 Up's not around anymore, is it? That's probably why he didn't get sued. And then he did 14 when they were 14. Then he came back when they were 21, and 28. I think they're up to 50-something years old now. There's entire videos of him talking to these people that he had filmed when they were 7 years old about what they wanted out of life, did they want to get married, what kind of job they want, and then follow them through their life to see what happened to them. Now, that's a very ambitious program, and unfortunately, you're almost dead by the time you get any good results. Because if he started interviewing people at 7 and they're now 50, and this guy was in his 30s, well, how old is he now? 70? So hopefully you can get somebody else to help you with this research, right? Or do it young. Okay? But it is fascinating that you can do these types of things. And that's considered to be sociological research. Alright. So keep the book open to page 15. Because this can, and mark, and you know, your dog tagged that page. But we're going to go over this. We'll go in the order that the book takes them. That way there's no confusion here. Your book starts with Symbolic Interactionism. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because it's one of the newest. But anyway, and you look at the characteristics of it again on page 15. And what I love about it is if you're confused about the general characteristics that I'm describing, you see them describing the application of symbolic interactionism on that right side of the page, on that paragraph under that heading. And they do that for each one of the perspectives so you understand what they are. Now here's one issue that you need to keep clear. The theoretical perspectives are sort of like schools of thought, like Freudian or Jungian psychology. So over top are the perspectives. In here, though, are the individual theories. For example, I look at from a conflict perspective approach, I look at how international corporations implement strategies around the world to open up markets. And one of the side effects of this is that even though a lot of good things come out of free trade, that bad products get inside of, like cigarettes, get inside of free markets and wreak havoc, and young people are targeted. And one of the theories that we're looking at is called Dependency Theory. And that's a theory that wealthy core countries of the world create conditions in other countries that allow for large multinational corporations to come in and dominate the economy and dictate things like labor policy and health and safety regulations. And along with that, who can buy cigarettes? Are cigarette companies allowed to advertise? All these types of things. Which in the United States, are cigarette companies restricted in their advertisement? Right, they can only really do it in magazines and point of sale advertisements, which mean where they sell the cigarettes. So if you go to 7-Eleven, I think I mentioned this before. Where's the cigarette advertisement? It's right on the 7-Eleven by my house. It's right on the door. And guess where it is? It's right here on the door. At eye level of a 5-year-old. And behind the cashier's register, there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? But in other countries, it's much looser. And the reason why, and there's TV advertisements on television and in movies and all kinds of stuff, and at sporting events and all this stuff. It used to be at one point, you could, if you were a tobacco company, you could still advertise in sporting events, and this is the way they could do it. You weren't allowed on TV, but you could buy a billboard on behind, a center field at Yankee Stadium. And how many people watch a Yankees game on a regular basis, right? At least a couple million. So you're getting exposure, and all you bought was a billboard. Okay? So that is a conflict perspective, but the individual theory is called dependency. And another theory that I'm using as well is world polity. I'm just using this as an example. World polity suggests that international non-governmental organizations, like the Red Cross, or like the Gates Foundation, which is dedicated itself to fighting infectious diseases and also addictive behavior like cigarettes, if they can diminish this impact of dependency by coming in and teaching people about the dangers of smoking and about spreading anti-smoking material and providing people with health information about the damage it does, bringing a guest speaker to schools, coming in and looking at and watching stores and seeing if they're selling cigarettes to kids, that type of stuff. Okay, and that can diminish it. So again, the perspectives are the sort of the school of thought. Those of you who are in psychology, a good way to think of it is Jungian and like Freudian. That they have different assumptions, they have different perspectives, they have different methodologies to look at, right? And I'm telling you right now, if you've ever seen a Jungian and a Freudian argue, and a lot of Freud's ideas have been debunked, and so have Jung's. But again, there's always these schools. It's like, to me, like in physics too, there's Newtonian, and there's Einstein, all this stuff. And in mathematics, there's Euclidean geometry, there's just these different schools. But underneath these things are these theories. Okay? And this is actually somewhat of a functionalist theory too. Like with, for example, in my media class just a few minutes ago, or about a half hour ago, there's a micro theory called social learning theory that says that the reason why the media is so important is that more and more people are using the media. And also that people learn lessons from observing other people, and that's what you see on TV. You see narratives, you see models of behavior, right? And it's not just the fact that the media offers models, but the parents are absent from the process, right? And evidence shows that when parents are involved, children tend to use less media in general and tend to understand the media content a little bit more, or not be impacted by, monkey see, monkey do. Like when Madonna started wearing like fishnet things and gloves, everybody else started doing it. It's like the thing with Lady Gaga is that if you wanted to dress like her, you'd need thousands of dollars, because I don't know anybody who has a lamb chop dress or whatever the hell that was. What was it made out of? I wish I had a Rottweiler. Anyway, that would have been a serious wardrobe malfunction. Why would you want to eat? And she's probably a vegetarian, isn't she?
She seems like
Yeah. But again, like with Lady Gaga, if you wanted to act like her, dress like her, did you see her at the New Year's? Man, Dick Clark looked terrible. Don't put zombies on TV. I thought that guy was dead. And then when I saw him, I really thought he was dead. I thought he was a robot. Poor Dick. I mean, I know he wants to be involved and everything, but dude, go home and rest. I guess when you're that close to the end, resting there's no point to it, right? When you're 89 years old, what's rest going to get you? Another 5 minutes? You want to be alive. I guarantee you, once you get in your 90s, you're afraid when you close your eyes and then coming back open. So, it's scary getting old, trust me. But again, if you wanted to dress, Lady Gaga had this big swan hat on. Go ahead and buy that. Okay, you might be able to make it in your garage. But anyway, so let's go back to the specific theoretical perspective. So first of all, here, according your book here, unlike structural functionalism and social conflict paradigms, the symbolic interactionist perspective takes a more micro-level orientation to social institutions, for example, or a more close-up focus on the social interaction in specific situations. Right? Like how the concept of what's right and wrong changes depending on who's in the room. When your parents are in the room, a hotel room with you, a lot of stuff is off limits, isn't it? But when it's just your friends at spring break down in Florida, all of a sudden things that were deviant or considered to be wrong or off limits are all of a sudden open, aren't they? Drinking, sex, drugs, staying up all night. This is certainly one thing that happens when young people transition into the college world. Particularly, it doesn't happen so much at this. Can anybody tell me why
people sort of acting out of control and binge drinking doesn't happen at this school versus something like Syracuse? What's different about Syracuse or even Stony Brook or Hofstra compared to this school? Where do most young people, students live? Yeah, so you can't throw raging kegers. And are there a lot of fraternities on this campus? The sororities? There are none, or virtually none. And the reason why is there's no housing for it to take place. What's funny is that Stony Brook, fraternities and sororities are not allowed to be housed on campus, but they're all over the place anyway. Because and this is what here's an example of an institutional rule causing an alteration in behavior that might cause an additional social problem. So what do the kids have to do? What do the young people have to do if fraternities and sororities aren't allowed on campus?
Get a house on campus.
That's right. And so now they're driving drunk to school in the morning or something, right? Or whatever. Now it's a social problem out in the neighborhood instead of on campus where it could have been more contained. You know, and now as well, can the university observe what's going on at these frat houses if they're 2 miles away?
No, they don't want to because then they'd be penalized for it.
But don't you want to know what the hell your students do on Friday and Saturday night?
I guess they don't.
That's certainly one way to get away from the liability of someone dying from alcohol poisoning, right? If they die in your dorm, you could be in trouble. Okay? Now, what's interesting is a sociological theory about micro-sociology would state, well, since the dynamics of this campus have slightly altered, now that there's a dorm, we should see more drunken behavior. And more party kind of frat behavior. The other theory would be, one dorm isn't enough. It's not enough to tip the scale. And it's not enough to change the culture of the institution. And I would assume that Molloy probably attracts students who are not attracted to drinking or fraternities. Don't you think? How many people here, one of the benefits, maybe not the main reason, but one of the benefits was no frats and drunken stuff going on? Nobody? You should go to Ohio State. Arizona State. I mean, Stony Brook's, Hofstra's a party school, isn't it? Isn't it pretty much a party? No? I mean, compared to... You want to talk about a school that's even St. Joseph's, for example, in Patchogue doesn't even have a dorm. And that is the most commuter-friendly school in the, well, except for the parking. But nobody stays on that campus. So on Thursday night, and there's usually no Friday classes, that campus is a morgue. You know, I've seen parks in the middle of February that had more people in it than that. I mean, there's absolutely... And Stony Brook's that way too. It's really weird. On Friday nights, I call it the Cemetery U. I mean, that's what it looks like. I mean, you can walk. It is like a ghost town. I see tumbleweeds and hear the wind whistling. I mean, it is like walking through like some old abandoned mine town. It is really strange. Whereas at Ohio State, Thursday nights when the party starts and it doesn't stop, and some of the students, they don't even go to class. Some people aren't even students. They just hang out. And I'll tell you right now, every time there's an Ohio State game, they burn couches, people fall off balconies. I remember driving down there on Wednesday night. I was there in May when classes were still going on. They were already out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon playing this little game when you put up this wooden thing and these little balls on a string and you throw it and it wraps around the thing. I don't know what it is. It's sort of like
I've seen that.
the thing with the bean bags. I've seen people at sports games and things do something like that. They were out there playing that little beanbag tic-tac-toe game or whatever the hell it is, and drinking right out on their front lawn. You know, and beer bottles and beer cans everywhere. And next time I go, if I get a chance to go back to spring break, or I'll have my sister go down there on Friday night or Saturday morning and film. There are literally 4 full blocks of sorority fraternity houses that go all the way down the street. I'm telling you, you get lost at fraternities there. You almost think that, again, that's why the students go there, you know. In Ohio State, you're sort of nameless and faceless, so the only way to sort of get involved in a group is to join a fraternity or sorority, otherwise you're just the nameless, faceless crowd. And that's a bit of a jock school, too. The sports teams dominate that school, the football team. The football team is a big deal, as you know, and they just got sanctions and rules. Anyway, so that's one way you could look at symbolic interactionism. It sees society as a product of the everyday interaction of individuals, whether in the home as a family, or at the workplace with coworkers, or as students at school with teachers and other students. And it's not that symbolic interactionists are not interested in culture or large organizational structures. They just look at it in a different way. They look at, well, okay, the American dream is sold to the American public, or at least taught to the American public. But here, if I asked each one of you, here's what a symbolic interactionist say. All right, fine. The culture says there's like this general dream. Like, for example, what's the American dream? Somebody give me some general characteristics. What is that? What's it mean?
Good job.
Right. What else?
Family.
Right.
Big house.
Right. Owning your own house. Right.
Being able to support your family.
Right? Maybe even being rich, be able to take some nice vacation, eventually, moving up. The point is upward mobility, to some extent, right?
Yeah.
That even if you start poor, middle class, that if you work hard, and you do the right things, and you take advantage of opportunities, that you'll be able to succeed. And achieve whatever goals you have. But if I asked each one of you specifically what you wanted out of the American dream, it would be slightly different. And symbolic interactionists are interested in where that difference comes from. Right? And where does it come from? Things like your experiences growing up, what your parents taught you, how these values are being reinforced by other people around you. Like one theory that's out there is this idea of strain, that if people are told unrealistic aspects of the, like, if your idea of the American dream is to be rich and famous, and to be on American Idol, and you can't sing, and you go on American Idol, and even Steven Tyler, who drug-addled brain can barely probably get woken up in the that guy uses more drugs than Charlie Sheen, goes, oh, that's terrible, and now your life is over. Your dream is over. And what Merton said was that leads to people either dropping out of society and just throwing up their hands and saying, screw it, I'm not going to have any more dreams, like it's devastating cynically, or it makes people want to go commit crimes or find another way to achieve wealth and fame. Okay, fine, I'll go deal drugs. Or I'll embezzle money. It's like Bernie Madoff. He found that it was very difficult to make his way in the stock market, based on how much he obviously wanted to be super rich, and he couldn't do it the legitimate way, so he just started a Ponzi scheme. And the things like that start gradually. I bet he took like $7 or $8 million from one account and nobody noticed, and he was like, huh. Just like L.A. Spitzer. There was the one point where he dialed the number for the first time, where he stepped over the line, right? It's like the difference between thinking about shoplifting and then sticking something in your pocket and walking out of the store. Okay? And symbolic interactionists are interested in that process. How do you get from here to here? And also, where does culture come into play with that? So symbolic interactionists view life as made up of interactions, and humans use symbols like language and the way you dress, and what kind of car you have, and the value systems you express. Many people are have you ever seen these people, and forgive me if you're one of these people, you ever seen these people who wear their personality on the bumper of their car? It's got every sign in the world. I break for vegetarians, I love animals, I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-life, vote for Obama. Some people wear it on their t-shirt, right? Do you have bumper stickers?
No.
Does anybody have one they want to share? I'm not making fun of it, but some people that's just the way they do it. Other people that's the last thing they would want to do. I would tell those people who do put this stuff on your bumper sticker, there are a lot of kooks out there, and you only need to meet a murderer once, or a weirdo or a violent person once, and if you go put stuff that's controversial like gay marriage and abortion on your bumper, and you may feel very strongly about it, you got every right in the world to put that on your bumper, but this kook's behind you is like, oh, here's one of these pro-choice people. Now, it's a very rare instance that happens. Beware of that, especially if you're driving through like more conservative states. Like if you're a liberal and you got a bunch of liberal bumper stickers, like you got a Obama bumper sticker in your car, I suggest not driving through Alabama. Seriously. Although a lot of people in Alabama or Texas don't drive through, or at least parts of Texas. There's some parts that are more liberal than others, but or Arizona where they voted down Martin Luther King's birthday as a holiday. They don't celebrate that in Arizona. I'm serious. They named an airport after Barry Goldwater. I mean, it's, Anyway, not that there's anything wrong with being a Republican, but if you're not a Republican, it's a problem. I think they actually tried to name the airport. No, I think they renamed it after Reagan or something silly. Something like that. Anyway. So again, it's how you present yourself to others. The society and reality are what people make of them. This latter point earmarks a critical tenet of interactionism. That realities and societies are created or socially constructed by individuals, not by large groups and business charters and constitutions. Like, for example, look, the Constitution was written by human beings. It's enforced by human beings. It's discussed and talked about and internalized by people. It's amended by people. It is a document, but without the people behind it believing in it, it's worthless. Right? And that's what the symbolic interactionists say. You can have all the culture in the world. If there's no people, there's no culture. And we need to look at how individual people absorb, internalize, and express culture and what they've learned. And this is some stuff about social institutions. So we'll talk more about that later. All right, let's go back to functionalism. Which again, I have told you that people don't use that much anymore, but it still has. This is where functionalism is valuable to sociology still now. What functionalism suggests is that institutions, from a normative perspective, meaning what they should do, is help stabilize society, address social problems, like the government. Did anybody see Obama's State of the Union address? Man, let me tell you something, Barry. You better start working on a re-election right now, because if you lose the youth vote, it's going to be a walkover for Gingrich or Romney. Could you imagine? I'm neither Democrat or Republican, but just Newt Gingrich's name alone. Can you sound out the words President Newt Gingrich? Does that sound strange? I mean, some people, Republicans, say Barack Obama sounds weird, right? Especially since his middle name is Hussein. And it is. This doesn't mean. I have met so many people from the Middle East whose last name was Hussein. I had a friend I met in Cardiff. His name was Osama Ali. And I was almost. He wanted me to send him a letter, like with some things in it. I was like, I don't want to. I was like, I'm not sure about sending a letter to Osama Ali. And the other guy's name was Muhammad Abaris, and I was like, and the one guy called himself CJ, so I was like, I'll put CJ in there. But it's bad that people have to hide that kind of stuff just because they have names for certain things. But again, the idea of functionalism is that, look, organizations should do what's right. And in Obama's State of the Union address, he spelled out, hey, the government should do this. It should fix roads and bridges. It should help prevent crime. It should help people with student loans. It should drive down the national debt. It should help the economy recover, right? But when we think about functionalism, think about the word function. And it looks at things like social institutions or culture. How do these things function in our life? How do they create a structure around what we do? Like, for example, things like language and customs and like things like shaking hands or value systems like capitalism and democracy. These are things we use personally, and we are taught by the larger society that we use to help understand and guide our life, our own goals, and also to understand the goals of society itself. So according to the slide here, the structural functional paradigm, credited largely to Auguste Comte. Remember, he was the guy who talked about using sociology for social reform, right? And there's the other issue. Functionalism talks about this is the right way to design a society. And you can see the problems right there by saying something's right versus wrong, or something's good versus evil. Once you get into an argument like that, like I got news. This shows you how relative things are. I got news for you. Al-Qaeda thinks you're evil. Okay? The North Korean people think you are the demons. You're the idiots. You're the one who have the bad government. You're the one who's pointing nuclear weapons at them. That's how quickly things can be switched around. Whereas we think the opposite of them. We think we're right. We probably are. We don't run airplanes into buildings. Okay? Not civilian targets. Although the U.S. military did shoot down an Iranian airliner in the 1980s and killed 300 people. They tend not to talk about that in the news. The Iranians haven't forgotten about it. They got murals on walls that depict it. Okay? So, again, one of the problems with functionalism is that's a normative approach. It talks about this is what is and this is what should be, right? Here's the criminal justice system. Here's how we fix it, right? Here's the problem. Does anybody know how to fix the criminal justice system? 100% certainty? So it's guessing, really, what it is, isn't it? I mean, we got some ideas about how you rehabilitate criminals, but general models are hard to apply. There's the other thing. Functionalism tries to apply large general models and say, all or most criminals can be rehabilitated with this type of program. When you know reality, the high level of individualism in the United States, one criminal might like therapy as a way to rehabilitate. The other one, might dislike sitting in their cell and thinking about what you see how certain things, in sociology and in life in many ways, one size never fits all. Okay, especially in a country that is as diverse as the United States. Maybe in other countries that are more homogenous, like Japan is basically 95% similarity, you know, of the population. Most of them are Japanese. There are not a lot of Americans there, or there's some Koreans and Chinese people, but in general, it's a pretty homogenous population. Not like the United States, where 50% of people have Hispanic or Latino background, 11 to 12% are black, 4 to 5% are Asian, 1% are Native Americans, 1% Arab, about 67 to 70% white. I mean, and within the white race, there's a lot of diversity. Is everybody all from England? I got like 9 or 10 different nationalities in my background, including some that don't get along, like French and German, which is probably why I fight with myself a lot. Anyway. Humans are believed to be able to thrive under these conditions when society, functionalists view society as a complex system like a body part, and when the parts work together, it creates solidarity and stability. And that helps society progress and invent things and make life better, and the standard of living goes up. The focus is on society as an entity that can flourish, making things like unity, cohesiveness, stability, and order fundamental necessities for social existence. Chaos, instability, and alienation disrupt society's functioning are considered undesirable. And also functionalists suggest institutions should be involved in diminishing this or eliminating this from society. That if there's a lot of crime in society, the society needs to get rid of it. If there's too much poverty, it needs to get rid of it. And what's interesting, in the 1960s, this is exactly what the federal government tried to do. You guys ever heard of the Great Society or the War on Poverty? Right? Lyndon Johnson did this stuff. That's why we have Medicare and Medicaid. And school lunch programs. And all kinds of stuff like that. Remember FDR with the New Deal? Right? Social Security, all that other stuff. Unemployment insurance. I know it's hard to believe. Can you believe that at one point the United States did not offer unemployment insurance to people who are out of work? Is there something wrong? Can you believe that? Right? And again, functionalists say, hey, look, that's the job of the government in particular to solve these problems. The second important proposition is that consensus about morality and values and conformity to norms are necessities for society's smooth functioning. So one of the assumptions that functionalists make is that you have to have a high level of homogeneous population or similarity or shared values in a society in order for it to work. Is that the case in America? People share values, or are they at each other's throats on issues like abortion and gay marriage and the national debt and the economy? Are politics nice in this country? It's rough and tumble, isn't it? And on a lot of issues, it's 50-50, like the abortion issue. 50% of the people are pro-life, 50% are pro-choice. Can you see the problem there? Do you think conflict's more likely when you have 70% of the people who believe something and 30% who believe the opposite, or when it's 50-50? What causes more conflict, do you think? Why? You say 50-50, why?
Because you have more people to back up.
Plus, each side thinks a few percentage points here or there can make all the difference, and that if two armies have equal strength, are they scared of each other? No, they're way more willing to go, hey, I like my chances here, right? It's usually only the Nazis that would take on people outnumbered them 3-1. So, because they thought they were the greatest soldiers on earth until the Russians ran right through them. So anyway, so that's a serious problem if we don't have a consensus that society can't function. So what's that mean for the future of a diverse society? And functionalists would use things like the Roman Empire and say, see, there was way too many ideas going around, there was way too many people who wanted power, there was way too much outside influence, there was no real solid culture, and eventually it just slowly fell apart. Right? The barbarians came and took it apart. Some people would say the same thing about the Soviet Union, right? And again, people would say that about America, that this isn't going to work because it's way too diverse, and it's not racial diversity or language diversity or even political diversity. It's just the element of people having differing thoughts about serious issues, ideological concerns. But race and gender and all these things do play into it. Sometimes it's generational. Like the older generation seems to not think that the national debt is a serious problem. Why do you think older people are really not that concerned about the national? Some of them are, because they're kids. Why do you think a lot of older people, especially in their 70s, are not worried about the national debt? Yeah, what are they were already getting Social Security. Medicare ain't going nowhere. You see the Congress, they're arguing so much nothing gets done, which again just preserves the status quo. And elderly people are worried about their particular situation right now, not about 25, 30 years ago, whereas young people should be much more concerned. Could you make the argument that older people would be concerned about the national debt, though? Why would an older person be concerned about the national debt over and beyond their own personal behavior? What might they have? Yeah, grandkids. You want to see your grandkids live in poverty because, and here's the thing: a lot of older people who have grandkids somewhat feels partly responsible that they didn't do enough to stop the government from spending all this money. You know, that there's an element of guilt or at least a feeling of responsibility. Okay. Anyway. Thus, while some conflict and deviation can be expected, but the government should take care of it, or the society should deal with it, especially as societies grow and become more complex, too much conflict and deviation will hinder solidarity and stability, and thus throw society into a state of chaos. Structural functionalists maintain that dysfunction and alienation in society's components fosters alienation and anime, which can become a motivation for conflict, deviance, and chaos. With regards to social institutions, functionalists believe that social institutions in general attempt to create progressive conditions in society along with stability, but many times social institutions like corrupt governments, monopoly corporations, and abusive religious institutions can persist despite the harm they do to society. Can anybody name an institution that contributes more to discord in society than order and stability? Something that causes conflict? Do religious organizations sometimes cause division and conflict? Let me put it this way. What do some preachers and priests say about things like homosexuality that might divide and create conflict? What do some, not all, but some preachers say about homosexuality? Yeah, that it's a sin. And if you don't turn back, you're going to hell. And that it's a choice. And that divides people, not just homosexuals and heterosexuals, but liberals and conservatives. Right? And you can name a whole host. Well, how about the government? Are they, surely the government's not causing conflict, are they? How's the government cause conflict? Let me put it this way. Does the president and the Congress get along? Right? And they're sort of causing conflict from a political perspective. Let me put it this way. Is there conflict harming the ability of the United States to move forward on certain policy issues? Like what? What's the conflict going to prevent that we were just talking about from getting solved, the problem, major problem? I'm going to put it this way. Are they going to, the current state of politics, are we going to solve the national debt with this attitude that the President and the Congress have towards each other? They can't even agree on the terms for debate. Right? So there's a problem right there. How about corporations? Surely they are interested in the well-being of all people, right? Can anybody name a corporation that polluted the environment and didn't seem not to want to take responsibility for it? How about BP? Remember the oil volcano or whatever the hell that was on the ground? And what are they telling people now? The Gulf states are telling people this stuff too. Is the problem solved? Is there any more oil in the Gulf, according to BP? If it is, it's negligible, right? Oh, it's safe to eat shrimp. I'm not eating anything. First of all, I wouldn't eat anything out of Long Island Sound, so why would I eat anything out of the Gulf? I went past a fish shop on my way home yesterday over by the Sunken Meadow Park, and the thing on the wall said, fresh fish. And I thought, you didn't get that out of Long Island Sound, did you? What's the problem with fish out of Long Island Sound, or New York Harbor? Would you eat a fish out of New York Harbor?
No.
I hope you guys know that sushi restaurants get this stuff out of New York Harbor, some of this stuff. Jeremy Piven actually sued
Well, like the mercury.
Broadway show because he got mercury poisoning.
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now, I go get a fish out of Long Island Sound, a flounder, and I take it to a scientific research lab. Do you really want to know what I'm going to find inside that fish? Think about that next time when you pick up. Now, some of it they test this fish, but again, I'm telling you right now, they for example, Lake Erie, they tell people not to eat more than one fish a month out of there. And Long Island Sound is filthy. I'm telling you right now, it just blows me away. But again, is the government doing anything about that, or is anybody, a corporation, trying to solve it? No, they're not. So anyway, all right, last one, conflict theory. Now, there's two main types of conflict theory. There's Marxist and non-Marxist.
obviously Marxist, is more closer to socialism and communism. And conflict theory seeks to explain why institutions do what they do, and why, and how cultures act the way they do. For example, conflict theorists would explain the spread and dissemination of the American dream by almost all social institutions as an attempt to manipulate and control the lower classes and to inculcate you into the consumer capitalist culture. The American dream is just as much about driving up profits for Home Depot as it is making you happy. Because here's the thing. A lot of the American dream has material aspects to it, right? House, a job, all that other stuff. Does that always make people happy? Isn't happiness part of the American dream? But do you think Home Depot cares whether or not you're happy? What does Sears Home Center care about? Yeah, they just care that you bought the couch and you paid full price for it. Who gives a damn if you burn it or throw it off of a cliff? You know, I'm telling you. And here's the other thing. Do marriage and having kids, does that generate a lot of money for the economy? Is getting married expensive? Right? Think about this. If marriage disappeared tomorrow, or at least big marriages, think about the businesses that would go out of business. Caterers, dressmakers, tuxedo people, people who do fountains and ice sculptures, and some weddings have like chocolate and champagne fountains and all this, bus boys and rental halls and all kinds of stuff. And think about what would go out of business if people didn't buy houses once they got married and have kids. Places that sell diapers and cribs and toys and binkies and bottles and formula. And Home Depot and Lowe's would be gone. Think about that. That's probably half the economy. Right? Crazy, isn't it? And conflict theorists say, you know what? Getting married and spending all this money, or even, and they would especially hate Christmas. What has Christmas become? Is it a religious holiday where people contemplate the birth of Jesus Christ? What is it like? What does your trash can look like? I mentioned this in my other class too, about media. What's your trash can look like the day after Christmas? Yeah. I'm sure Jesus is smiling about that. How many people here, who celebrate Christmas, how many people here on Christmas Day you discuss the birth of Jesus? If Jesus had a grave, he'd be rolling around in it. If you believe he's resurrected, so there's not a body there. Somebody's rolling around, okay? But Marx would say Christmas is a perfect example of how capitalist society uses religion and Santa Claus and all this goofy and guilts parents into buying their kids presents. Because if they know that if their kids go to school and say they got nothing for Christmas, that it's emotionally devastating, isn't it? Imagine an 8-year-old talking to his friends at school. What'd you get for Christmas? Oh, I got this, that, this. What'd you get? Nothing. My parents are trying to teach me non-materialistic values. We went down to the homeless shelter and fed homeless people. And then we talked about Jesus. Yeah. And I'm sure the 8-year-old would love that too. Mom, why do we have to hang around smelling you? Anyway. But again, conflict theorists suggest institutions manipulate people. Capitalism, for Marxists, is the main thing. And the thing that capitalist elite wants is to maintain power and increase their wealth, and they'll do it any way they have to. If they can send jobs to China, if they lay people off, if they have to take $700 billion bailouts, if they have to rob and steal, if they have to fool you into buying plastic junk that's never going to decay or degrade, if they have to fool you into thinking Christmas is about presents, they have to fool you that marriage is about buying a big house. What's the cost of a diamond ring or a diamond engagement ring according to the diamond companies? How much you should spend? I love this one.
Like $10,000.
2 months' salary. And the reason why they use 2 months' salary, do you know why they use 2 months' salary instead of just a set figure? If they said $5,000, you're pricing a lot of people out, aren't you? You say 2 months' salary, it could mean $800, right? And I'll tell you right now, I mean, they really have the whole world sort of wrapped up in this idea that this is just what you do, that this is just the way you behave, and that this is what makes you happy. And I'm telling you right now, they've done studies on materialistic people, and they are some of the most miserable people in the world. The United States ranks very low on the happiness scale. There are other countries like Iceland and Denmark that are way happier than we are. And they got a lot less wealth too. Sweden. Even places like Kenya.
Some of the middle-class people there are happier than middle-class people in the United States. The reason why is because they're not chasing after garbage. And think about all the time people take shopping and buying things and trying things on and obsessing with the next thing to buy when they could be spending time with their family. And you're told that the economy will... What's going to happen if everybody starts to decide to conserve and not buy anything anymore? That we're tired of this materialism. What happens to the economy? What happens to an economy that needs constant growth in order to maintain its employment? What happens? What happened in 1929? What happens? It just happened again. Yeah. Serious, serious problem. A whole collapse. Don't worry, I'll get that. You guys are looking at me like, I can't believe I'm leaving. Anyway. So again, part of conflict theory is this idea that you are being manipulated by elites. And you're made to believe that you have control over the economy. You don't. You're made to believe that you have a say in the democratic process, and you don't. One of these days, when we have some time, I'm going to call the White House up and prove to you that the president doesn't want to talk to me, or you, or anybody else who's broke. I heard somebody. This should tell Obama something. I heard somebody, probably was somebody who would have voted had to have been old enough for Obama, say, "Man, Obama hasn't done anything." I don't think that's necessarily the case, but at least there's a perception out there that he's done nothing. So anyway, but back to this idea of manipulation. So from the Marxist perspective, social conflict theory is a Marxist-based social theory which argues that individuals and groups, social classes within society have differing amounts of material and non-material resources, the wealthy versus the poor, and that the more powerful groups use their power in order to exploit groups with less power. Is this what's going on in America? Are wealthy, powerful elites gaming the system so they can get whatever they want and everybody else has to eat the crumbs off the ground? Is that what's happening? Do you guys realize that the average corporate CEO's salary is 360 times the average American salary? They make more in one day than you do in an entire year. You think that's right? Does Alex Rodriguez deserve $250 million for what he does for society? You think so?
No, I don't.
Some people do. Although they're not Yankees fans. Yankee fans have a weird relationship. When he wins the World Series, they're cool. Otherwise, he's just a whiny little brat. And they don't want to hear the crap he has to say. And after he cheated on his wife, he's really not good either. Yes?
Why is it looked down upon if the CEO is making more in one day than you are in a year?
Because is their value 360 times greater than the value of a janitor? Because I'll tell you right now, I'd rather live in a world without CEOs than a world without janitors.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying why is everyone attacking them? Because they had to have started working hard at one point to get to where they are. It's not like they were just given that.
Well, a lot of them were. You think George Bush actually earned the wealth that he has?
No, that's from his dad and everything like that.
And his dad bought him the Texas Rangers, which gave him the publicity to run for governor of Texas, which gave him the publicity to run. And
I'm not talking about people like that. I'm talking about other people though, people that actually work up into there.
I mean,
they get generalized into that whole.
Okay,
group.
all right. You're trying to say though that all CEOs were born middle class, and I'm telling you that virtually none of them were.
Okay.
I mean, you do have some situations, but virtually none of these people come out of nowhere. You're actually more likely to see that with the presidency, like Obama. He grew up pretty poor, but he went to Harvard, which is the elite institution. Then he went and worked for a law firm that was where he got paid a lot of money. And then he got to the Senate, which is another elite institution. So slowly he became an elite. But you're all right. But I would say to you, do you think it's fair that, do you really think that their contribution to society, not to the company, is so significant as to warrant a $150 million salary for some of these CEOs? And that's part of the problem. I don't think anybody in America is going to fault somebody for being wealthy, necessarily. If you're wealthy and you're worthless, like Paris Hilton, then it bothers people. That you didn't earn that money, and you're wasting it, you waste your life, you mock everything that is good in this country, you mock hard work, you mock the middle class, you spend $1,700 on a handbag when most people don't make that in 1 month, and that just bothers people. Whereas CEOs are at least working, right? They're at least doing something. But at least there's a sense that you as individuals don't have power to take, like, you can't go to Walmart and say, hey Walmart, why don't you pay your employees $11 an hour so they can actually eat? You know what Walmart would say to you? Get the hell out of here before I call the cops. What are you, union organizing? Right? And again, presidential candidates and political candidates, they listen to one set of people. Who? They give them what? Who is the president answering the phone when it calls? When they call? It ain't me. Who do you think that he's interested in talking to? Huh? How do you run for president? That's right. So is he the president of his donors, or is he the president of the United States? Because to a lot of it, again, this is not why I believe I'm playing devil's advocate here. Okay? This is what conflict theorists say. He ain't the president of the United States, he's the president of these people who gave him the money. And he does their duty first, and then when he's done helping these people out, then he'll throw some crumbs down to us poor people underneath the table. Because here's the thing. Did they bail out homeowners? Or did they bail out banks? Did the bank CEOs really need any more money? I would say to a bank CEO, if you make $20 or $30 million a year and you don't have any money left, that's your damn fault that you didn't save that money. Nobody told you to spend $30 million a year. I don't feel... Here's my editorial for today. I just find it hard to feel sorry for AIG employees. I find it hard. They make at least, an average employee probably makes 5 to 6 times what the average American makes. And the CEOs and executives make 100 to 200 times at least. And they wrecked that company and almost wrecked the entire economy. You know what you would call that? If AIG was from Afghanistan, you know what we would call those people? Terrorists. They wrecked. You think Bin Laden didn't want to wreck the economy? Bin Laden, when he was still alive, was probably going, thanks a lot, dumbasses, for doing it for me. I don't need to lift a finger. You know? It's like wishing someone bad and then they go out and they punch a cop. It's like, thanks for doing my business for me, idiot. You just got yourself in trouble, right? Now, we don't call them terrorists because they made mistakes. But again, if they're the smartest and brightest of us all and deserve the highest salary, then why are they making enormous mistakes like this? You have Alan Greenspan saying, I had no idea what was going on. He was the head of the Federal Reserve. Anyway, again, that's our conflict theory's perspective. It's not my perspective. But again, the two methods by which this exploitation is done are through brute force economics, either by threatening violence or threatening to take away money, or also using the media that can persuade people. Earlier social conflict theorists argued that money is the mechanism which creates social disorder, and especially the differences in income inequality. The theory further states that society is created from ongoing social conflict between various groups. The only change that happens, like look, remember that SOPA bill? Remember the Stop Online Piracy bill? There was a bill in Congress to stop online piracy. It was put there, the entertainment industry wanted this passed. Right? Hollywood wanted this passed because they were getting their materials being stolen and uploaded illegally, and people were viewing it without paying for it. You know who was on the other side of that debate that stopped it? Google, Facebook, YouTube, okay, Microsoft, well, maybe not Microsoft, but other companies. So what you had was two groups of elites battling over the law. The law essentially got stopped. Do you think if the public would have been outraged, it would have been stopped? Maybe during an election year, right? Maybe. The politicians always love to pander to people during an election year, right? I almost think if it was legal, they would just hand out $100 bills and say, vote for me. I really think politicians would do something that slimy. I mean, they essentially do that anyway by like promising things like tax cuts. Isn't that almost the same thing as a form of bribery? I mean, can the United States afford tax cuts at $1.5 trillion deficits every year? I love this. They've cut taxes on rich people like 15 times over the past 30 years. They haven't raised the minimum wage more than like 3 times. Isn't that a little strange? Again. Alright, we'll leave it at that. Next time we'll go over the culture article. Make sure to read chapter 3, which is the bureaucracy.